Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that I am live now. Thank you for joining me for weekend considerations, including Blackface. So let's just start with that as we're waiting for people to come into this little chat event thing. Blackface. So you've got this guy in Virginia, and apparently these, photographs have emerged that show him in some kind of blackface, or possibly it's him, possibly he's the guy in the Klan costume beside him. And this is, graduate studies kind of age. So I'm imagining, mid 20s, 20 to 25, somewhere in that range. And I just can't bring myself to understand why the fuck anyone cares. Who cares if a guy put black paint on his face and pretended to be a black person? I mean, really, who cares? I certainly don't give a fuck. And why would anyone? The hand wringing, the outrage, the fury that has erupted in the news, and on Twitter, online, social media, all that stuff. It's stupid. I mean, who cares? I mean, I get the idea that it's, a stick that you can beat a Democratic governor of Virginia with. And I get that he's the same guy who is running around calling other people racist. And yet he's shown wearing blackface in 1984 or something. But honestly, who gives a shit? Why would anyone give a shit? It's ridiculous that we do. And it's a very bad sign that everyone is trying to pile on with this. So I don't care if black people do a white face. And I think to myself back, some Halloweens back when I was probably in my early 20s. And a friend of mine and I, we dressed up as assassins from Alamut, the Hashishin, right? Shiite Muslim assassins. And of course, this was just an imaginary costume, but, it was kind of like a ninja meets the Middle East. And we did our faces brown, and we went and got the theatrical wax, that you use to change the shape of your nose and stuff. It's Halloween. You can pretend to be whatever the fuck you want to. And while we're on the subject of this feigned outrage, this colossal stupidity, if people are really going to get all worried about that, worked up about it, what about all the hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people who aren't white, who never had blonde hair, who never would naturally have blonde hair, who don't even have blonde hair really in their genetics, unless it's some kind of insane genetic sport? What about all these people bleaching their hair, becoming suicide blondes, dyed by their own hand? What about that? I mean, everybody's supposed to get upset if you put shoe polish on your face because you're trying to imitate how a black person looks, in theory. What about all the people culturally appropriating, or mocking us? All the women out there who bleach their hair blonde, black women with blonde hair. Is that not cultural appropriation? It's something. Maybe it's not cultural appropriation. Maybe it's whiteface. What about all these people engaged in whiteface? So these are the kind of things that go through my mind as I'm sipping a old fashioned. Welcome to everyone this Saturday night. I'm going to see if I can get my chat window lined up here, popped out where I can see it easily and follow thereby what is transpiring in this chat window of ill omen. All right. I have a number of subjects tonight. My blackface rant was short, and there it is. It's nothing much. A couple of other things that we might be able to talk about tonight. I got some books that came in that I was waiting for. What else? I have a whole esoterica theme that I might want to take a look at if everybody's up for it tonight. I haven't done anything on the esoterica series in quite some time, so that's a possibility. Another thing that I'm still thinking through, but maybe I can just kind of get it out of my system and put you guys through the misery of hearing my half-formed thoughts, which, believe me, are worse than my fully formed thoughts. And that's on cosmopolitanism, syncretism, and the drive towards universalism as this Western cultural feature. So that is what is in the offing for those of you who might wish to stay or go, depending on whether or not you like the topic. Full disclosure at the outset. Now let's see here what we have in our chat section. What have I missed? Oh, I'm looking at just Top Chat, where I need to look at Live Chat, which is everything. As usual, ladies and gentlemen, I beg your indulgence for my idiocy. Storm of Steel is in. Hello. Glad you could catch it. Movius Quotatius is here. More cowbell, sir. 6 Cent Soldiers. It looks like I have interrupted somebody's Angry Birds game. Mexican 111, 3%er. Zedez, nice. Disciple of Bugs in here talking about how some Asian women even bleach their nipples. Yes. Yes, indeed. All right. So this is what we have. Yeah. So what should I go into first? Well, the cosmopolitanism thing is something that I'm thinking about because there's a whole lot of talk about what has been done to the West by Jews, what has been done to the West by Zionists, by commies, and these things tend to overlap, and everyone comes up with their own spin on it, their own flavor. To what degree an ethnic group is responsible, to what degree it might be an ideology. Some people will say, well, they overlap so thoroughly in many respects that what's the point with even trying to divide them? And I think it's very important because you should accurately identify your opponent. Or if you want to be really charitable, you can say you should accurately identify your competitor, however you want to put it, in a nice, friendly, safer space kind of way. And because that's important, it's worth our time, I think, to really try to get to the bottom of what is happening, why it's happening, and who the players might be behind the scenes. And so as soon as you dig into that, it's like, wow, you have, the Frankfurt School and certain ethnic groups seem to be highly overrepresented among the forces that can be described as utopian, communist, socialist, and the rest. So that is something I'm digging into, and I don't want to go into it too much here. That will be discussed over on BitChute. Oh, and while we're on that, some announcements very quickly. I'll come right back to this. But first off, there is a clip that was posted to BitChute, and it is on oil and Venezuela and China. It was a short discussion I had with Mr. Tim, and we decided to, it's not on BitChute. I mean, it is on BitChute. It's over on a safer space. So it's on YouTube and on BitChute under a safer space. That's one clip. A lot of people haven't seen it. I think it has less than 500 views at this point, so not many people probably know about it. Go check it out. I am trying to post to these other places so you don't have these backup subscriptions for nothing. Second thing, I got a special request from Luciferian Outlaw to tackle this topic of personal violence in the age of the panopticon, in the age of digital surveillance, when at any given time you're being captured probably by at least 2 cameras. That one, for reasons that should be obvious to everyone, went up over on a BitChute only. It will be a BitChute exclusive. I shouldn't say went up. It's going to go up tomorrow. I have it ready to render, but I wanted to do this live stream, so I didn't want my processor blazing away on that in the background. But I will set it to render. It'll come up tomorrow, and I will post it on BitChute. So look for that. Personal violence in the digital age. Tim is in fine form with that one. And last but not least, before I come back to my business about cosmopolitanism, there is a clip in which Tim and I discuss his, what he calls individualist socialism, which is probably better termed mutuality. And we got into that. It's 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere in their discussion, and we kind of hashed that out a little better. I had some suspicions about where he would place the various pieces on the board as relates to that topic, but it was good to talk to him, and I think I perhaps seized the pebble from his hand. You yourselves can be the judge of that when it posts. I expect that will probably be something like Sunday night, Monday at the latest. So back to cosmopolitanism. I was saying that I don't want to get deep into the question of, whether it's the Jews or the commies, or if indeed there's any value in dividing them, if they can be divided, these kinds of questions. I have my own thoughts about that, but I will cover it over on BitChute. I bring it up because there's something kind of further behind the scenes, and it has to do with this idea of cosmopolitanism, and I think it goes back even further to syncretism. So you think about multi-culti, you think about global homo, globo homo, I should say, as a theme. And, just think about the restaurants. What would happen if, this system of multiculturalism broke down? I wouldn't be able to enjoy Thai food and all the delicious fusions that have resulted from it. Well, that goes back further in some ways than the big trading city entrepot, the multicultural potential balkanization and all of that. And hence it goes back further than some of these ethnic groups. Well, not further than their existence, but further from them exerting a heavy sway on the West. So what I'm getting at is that before you had any kind of question that you might want to tackle, and though you might get attacked even for raising such questions, before such questions had really arisen strongly, I mean, there are issues with Spain, we had syncretism in the West. And you can look back to Renaissance syncretism. There is a guy by the name of Pico della Mirandola, the Count of Mirandola, and he was a famous, gifted young student of Marsilio Ficino, who was a philosopher and a translator of the Corpus Hermeticum, the Hermetic works, which back in his day were thought to be as important, as valuable, and as old as Plato's works. And just by the by, Marsilio Ficino translated Plato as well. So it's at the Florentine Academy. This is 1460s through 1480s, somewhere in there. Same time where you have like, what's his name? The Birth of Venus. And the Three Graces. Good God, it'll come to me, man. He's Botticelli. Same period with Lorenzo Alberti, the great, golden age of Florence with the Medici family and everything else. Marsilio Ficino was doing his thing. Pico della Mirandola came in and studied under him. They're getting exposed to what they thought was antiquity in the form of the Corpus Hermeticum, the Hermetic works, but it turns out that they're probably from the Hellenistic period. So these guys are translating these ancient mystical texts. In Christian Europe, before the Reformation, and they think that they're much older, but they're not. And since they're from the period of the Hellenic world, the Hellenistic world, whatever you want to call it, there's just a massive amount of syncretism. Everybody forgets that all over the Mediterranean, you had this overlapping of all these different cultural elements. So you could have something that was Ionian and probably much older than Greek settlement in Ionia or Asia Minor, and it would be a mother goddess. And yet during the syncretistic period of the Hellenic world, that mother goddess would be viewed as, you could simply interpret it as Artemis, right? Or, the Great Mother, but it's a variant of Artemis. Or you'll get, Diana, which is conflated with Artemis, but it's actually very different. In the early forms, you'll find that she's associated with mountain lakes and things. This is more Italian, maybe with variants with the Etruscans. But wherever they appear, everybody says, oh, that's just a version of the great goddess, right? Because it all kind of fits under some kind of umbrella or other in the way they think about it, because they've seen too much evidence that, oh yeah, all these different cultures, they have a god that might be associated with the sky and thunder, and we have a god who's associated with the sky and thunder, so it must just be a version of that god. And that framework for knitting these pieces together and seeing it as a whole was well developed by the period of Hellenism, or the Hellenistic world. This period basically after, during and after, mainly after Alexander, before the big rise of the Romans as a unifying power in that area. That's kind of what you call, somebody might argue with me about the details, but that's the gist of it. So we've had this syncretism, this idea of overlapping cultures, the ways in which they overlap. It's been around for a century, millennia. I mean, at least a couple millennia. Getting close to 2. So it's certainly nothing new in the West. And yet we think, oh, well, there's a particular tribe of people and we got cosmopolitanism and merchants and all the rest. And they're the ones who caused us to open, our culture up in this way to all these other themes and aspects. And as a consequence, we've suffered, damage to our culture, and, we're on a rocky road. Well, it's not to say that there's not something of that to all of this. Again, I will address that, perhaps it'll be one way, perhaps it'll be another in my BitChute clip. But the fact is that the syncretism which is tied to cosmopolitanism, has been around for a long time. I mean, you got the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Greek dynasty, and you've got Greek traders up on the Black Sea coast. You've got the King of Kings, you know, the Persian Empire and all of the cultural cross-pollination that came with it. And then that comes down and, you know, sort of meets the Greek world in the Black Sea area and in Asia Minor. And then those Greeks head further west, you know, settling Sicily, which used to be called Magna Graecia, some shit like that. All over the ancient Mediterranean. I mean, that's not even getting into Phoenician traders rolling around through the Pillars of Hercules and up into what's now Cornwall to trade tin and bronze. Carthaginians, you know, more or less related by descent to the Phoenicians. It's been one cosmopolitan world, at least in, you know, major cities like that, for quite some time. So we have to look back quite a ways into our own culture and background to understand what is going on with this cosmopolitanism. I mean, it's interesting to look at the word cosmopolitan. I think I have a note up about that here or there. Where did I put this? Yes, cosmopolitan. So from roughly around 1815, the word has the meaning free from local, provincial, or national prejudices and attachments. From cosmopolite, citizen of the world, on the model of metropolitan. This kind of oddly brings me to this word of metrosexual, which was very much in use about 10 years ago. So from about 1833 on, we have it as, quote, belonging to all parts of the world, limited to no place or society, meaning composed of people of all nations, multi-ethnic, is from 1840. And then we have the U.S. women's magazine, Cosmopolitan, of the same name, first published in 1896. As a noun, quote, one who is at home all over the world, a cosmopolite, is from the 1640s. And then you have the cocktail and all the rest. And then we have cosmopolitanism, in reference to an ideology that considers all humans as a single community, is recorded by 1828, took on a negative tinge in the mid-20th century, suggesting an undermining of indigenous and national societies, and often tied to the supposed influence of the Jews. So cosmopolitanism, we have this idea of traveling all over the world. You know, it certainly didn't take influx of Jews to make Brits complain about how members of their military living abroad would go native. The draw is there. You know, sailors running off. I don't know, Tahiti, just to pull a name out, name of a place out of my ass. You know, running off from the beach into the jungle and marrying local women. You know, or smoking hash with the Shivites and taking an Indian bride. You know, if you look at some of the stuff that what's his name, Burton, Richard Burton, was involved with before he came back and settled down and married a proper English woman. You know, this cosmopolitanism is in us and has been in us forever. So anyway, this is a thing that I have been giving quite a bit of thought to, that I want to understand better, because I think people who look to the sources of the challenges we face or the ailments culturally with which we're afflicted, I think they're too quick to lay it all at the feet of someone else. Now, it doesn't mean that there might be blame to go around in that direction too. Again, I will tackle that elsewhere. But the bottom line is, I don't like the idea of making others out to be the victimizers of whites. I don't mind if they get claimed to be would-be victimizers, but to recognize them as, for example, my victimizer, just doesn't fit with agency. I'm not saying you have to lie about it or pretend things aren't happening, but we are, or at a minimum, we should all be able to agree that we should be responsible for our own actions and behavior. And, you know, if we have fucked off in terms of remaining vigilant and doing what we need to do to protect our own culture, surely the blame for that lies most squarely at our feet. So I have another subject, which I will get to in a minute, but I want to check through here and see what's been going on in the background. Although now I'm a little bit terrified. This is probably all a bit too detailed for me to read through and keep you guys waiting for, but I will take a look. Susan W. notes syncretism largely influenced by geography. If there are no large natural boundaries, mountains, rivers, etc., it was hard to stem the tide of migration. Yes, but there are some distinctions there. So in the Caucasus, from which we derive our term Caucasian, but I'm referring to the mountain ranges, it's like a crazy honeycomb of radically disparate cultures, and they're all frozen up there in time. So you've got, a lot of people remember when Russia came along what used to be the old Georgian military highway down into Georgia, they had to head through what's called South Ossetia. And for their part, the Georgians had been trying to move north to take control of at least one end of that pass, because it's a major route through the Caucasus Mountains, which are like a wall. They're like the southern fortress wall of Russia. And this area, the Caucasus, has many tribes like these South Ossetis up in there. And there are many tribes with their own distinct languages that, just for the record, don't exist anywhere else on Earth. And you'll find one or two villages in one or two neighboring valleys, and they're the only ones left on Earth that speak these languages. And yet, if you go over the ridge down into the next valley, you'll find another one of these ancient languages where it's the only one that survives. I mean, you've got Laks and Lezgin and the Vainak, the Chechen people, Avars, Kumiks. There are Jews up in the Caucasus Mountains, Adige, Abaza, different flavors of what we like to call Circassian. It's insane. And this is an area where they didn't really have control over migration. I mean, right outside of the immediate range of the mountains, because massive. I mean, you go back to the Goths and the Huns. You can look at the Mongols. They set up under the Golden Horde, one group of them in what is now Crimea. The Cossack hosts and other Turkic tribes, Avars coming through and settling in Hungary in like the 9th or 10th century, somewhere in there. And what happened with each of these passing groups is little eddies of people, smaller groups that weren't as strong, got pushed up to seek refuge in those mountains. And you would think it would lead to a cosmopolitanism, and it does in some respects in terms of material culture. Many of these people dress the same way, many of them employ the same fighting techniques, but they have their own languages. And even after the advent of Christianity and Islam, they developed their own or maintained their own religions for quite some time. And even the ones that are superficially Muslim, and there are some that are very seriously Muslim, or superficially Christian, they still keep their folk beliefs. So the lack of borders, I don't know if that, I mean, certainly that would account for much of it, but I think the picture is more complex than that. So what else do we have here? Ooh, Mithraism. That's something we'll have to talk about another time. Have I checked out the channel, The Modern Hermeticist? No, I have not. Don't worry, people. I will not just sit here noodling over these comments forever, boring those who are watching. I just want to take a look and see if I missed anything major. Let's see here. I got a woman asking why a female hasn't snapped me up. I think the issue is my expectations are a little bit high. How do I say this? My expectations are probably unrealistic. All right, possible evolutionary pressures towards syncretism, cosmopolitanism. Perhaps it certainly allows you to grab hold of knowledge if you're one of the hungry peoples that accepts foreign knowledge. I think there's some kind of definite link between the way in which English in particular is such a whore. As a language, we love to grab and adopt and thieve and take every word we possibly can and to form new words. I mean, we're not like the Germans forming these crazy long compound words, but we'll just take words from anywhere, which is why we have these enormous lexicons, reflected in enormous dictionaries. So by finding the name or a new word for a thing, you make space for it in what is that group of people's collective inheritance. So, I mentioned this before, Tim mentioned it to me years ago. We say love. So you can say, I love Brad Pitt, I love moon pies, and I love you, and I love to go fly fishing. Well, are all those really the same love? I mean, I don't know that I'm going to be impressed if a woman says she loves me, but she loves moon pies and Brad Pitt. You know, am I just part of that package? And yet, if you take a look at, you know, whatever the example is, what it is, but if you take a look at Greek, you have philia, which is, you know, brotherly love, as I recall, eros, which is erotic love, agape, which is pure love without judgment. You know, they distinguish these things with distinct words. And so when you talk about whether or not population pressures, or evolutionary pressure, I should say, plays a role in syncretism as a strategy, cosmopolitanism too, possibly to some extent, I'd say, yeah, there's an argument can be made for it. You know, the Chinese, as Tim often talks about, had gunpowder for quite some time, and they used it to make pretty lights at night. We took it and said, oh man, I can take down a Cavalier and a breastplate with this shit. Give me a matchlock, right? And that is, of course, the result of us wandering so far afield. I mean, you've got, for all anybody wants to talk about a Jewish diaspora, I would challenge them with a German diaspora, with the Irish diaspora, these massive diasporas of people from the West who travel all over the globe and absorb all kinds of things that they come into contact with. All right, so what's here? Have I checked out the EU Parliament address by Lawrence Southern? No, I have not. Okay. It looks like it will be too obnoxious for me to go through these right now and just try to sort out what the questions are. So I'm going to move on to my second topic. And then perhaps we'll have some question and answer stuff when we're done. Damn, I'm out of whiskey. That's all right. I'll have sugar. Okay, so what's coming up next is kind of an esoterica consideration. What I'm going to talk about is something that I have meant to do a clip on for a long time. The thing is that it's just going to be a pain in the butt to set it up as a proper clip and edit the little sections together. And, you know, I don't really know how to do it the quickest way as a clip that's produced in advance, but it is something that I put together kind of a PDF about as a thing to share with my immediate circle of friends and to capture some of my thoughts. And I have that PDF and I have some JPEG images that I created for it. So I think what I can do in a live stream is kind of go through it and show it to you. And I think you guys will soon see, I have figured out how to share my screen in Google Hangouts. Boomer Tech, you guys should be proud of me. And if that is in fact the case, we're about to find out all about it. Okay, so the topic of this, how do I start with this? You hear death compared to sleep all the time. You know, to sleep, perchance to dream. The idea of sleeping and dying, the parallels are so obvious, and they appear, I would imagine, universally among all human groups, because, you know, you lie down on the ground, you get up again. You know, are they dead or are they asleep? You know, this kind of thing is, for obvious reasons, a parallel that has been drawn by any number of people in probably all times and places. So, but it's something I wanted to look at, because if we're already relating these things, it would seem as though there's good reasons for it. Maybe there's some secret wisdom hidden there in the idea of comparing death to sleep. So, what do we have here? How shall I start this? I think one way to take a look at it is there's a guy, Evans Wentz, and he's got a book called Tibetan Yoga and Secret Doctrines. And in it, he lays out some Tibetan Mahayana esoteric Buddhist sorcery type shit that is, it's a kind of dream yoga. And he specifies that dream yoga is a first step before one undertakes bardo yoga, right? The yoga between lives. And it's explicitly said in that text that, or in some of these texts that are grouped in that volume, that in order to kind of go through a training wheel process to prepare oneself to maintain continuity of consciousness after death, that one should first play the game of attempting to maintain continuity of consciousness through periods of wakefulness and sleep. Now, one way that we would consider this would be to say, oh, well, you know, that would just mean that I stay awake. Well, no, but then you're not asleep. So you don't have the idea of the disjunction in the nature of your consciousness. No, the trick is somehow to go to sleep and be asleep and yet maintain your consciousness. So that is the dream yoga. It's kind of like lucid dreaming if you didn't wake up in your dreams, if you maintained a conscious sort of observer of some kind, some nature, through the process of going to sleep and waking up on the other side. And then the notion is that you will somehow use this, again, as kind of training wheels in order to maintain your awareness when you move from one body to another. But there are all kinds of things that come to mind. So if I go to sleep and then wake up, well, you know, what's passed? 8 hours of time has passed. You know, is my beard a little bit longer? You know, when I get up, is my face a little bit puffier? You know, as I first hear the bird song and I sense the light filtering in through my closed eyelids, maybe it takes me a moment to get oriented, but I'm 8 hours older. I'm still in the same time and space as where I went to sleep before. So the process of reorientation is, doesn't seem to be particularly challenging. But now consider a situation where you have all the developments of a long life, all the experiences, all the attitudes, all the prejudices, all the lessons that have been learned or burned into us. Now, this should be particularly interesting to people who are my age or older because, you know, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But in an even deeper sense, you know, as I get older, certain things are patterns now. And I don't care to change them. Part of the cussedness that comes with getting a little bit older is that you fuck anybody who wants to make you change it, you know, and why? Well, think about that. Think about that kind of deeply imprinted perspective. And then think about the dislocation and all that. Just imagine the things that would happen when the body falls apart. And, you know, in the Stoic phrase that Tim likes to repeat so much, when the house is, you know, full of smoke, you leave. But then what happens? You might, you know, it's not like waking up 8 hours later. It's more like, where would you be in time and space? How are we to know that we'd even be within this theme of developing stories that we call this world, this here and now in the multiverse? And not only that, but perhaps you're a different race. Perhaps you're a different gender. Let's leave aside the questions of whether or not there's metempsychosis, you know, reincarnation, if you will, that runs across species. Let's just stick with the idea of humans for the moment, because then you get all kinds of other questions. You know, is there room inside a grasshopper to hold the consciousness that has been developed, the mechanisms for its articulation, sensation, the capturing of experience? Do those things exist when you're talking about going from a man-sized bucket for consciousness over to a rat or a centipede? But if you just consider human beings, not only might you be a different race, you might also be a different gender, in a different culture, in a different time and place. Not only that, but think about what you went through learning how to walk, how to tie your shoes, how to pronounce sounds, forming scent bonds with your mother, or the little toys that get put in babies' cribs where you look up at the dangling things on strings over your head and your eyes slowly learn to focus, and you get the sense that this hand that reaches out is a part of me that can affect things. You're not frightened simply by seeing and not knowing whose it is. All the reflexive consciousness lessons, not to mention the complex functions related to speech, language, and word-based reasoning. I mean, there's just a pile of things. So you go from being a crotchety 80-year-old man into an infant, you know, floating in the amniotic fluid and then yanked out of its mother's womb, you know, hopefully head first without being half crushed. feeling the umbilicus stretching and stretching and stretching with a feeling that would have to be the greatest sense of alarm that would have ever occurred to any creature. And you can't speak. You're not sure where you begin and everything else ends. And it would seem that there is a good reason for this tradition that we were dipped into the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, you know. And Tim has often reflected on the idea that, you know, maybe there's good reason that we don't remember what came before, because there is a desire to clear the slate to some extent in order to assay the lessons of manifestation yet again. So that's the background. That's what I was thinking about. I said, you know, sleep and death and Bardo yoga and dream yoga, and how can we draw parallels? So this is really just a riff on that, the idea that you could use one as training wheels for the other, and the fact that we have these metaphors. So I'm going to try to share my screen now. Where are we? Somebody just noted watching Groundhog Day over and over, how appropriate. Yes. Life imitates art. Okay, so where is my, that's sharing screen. Hopefully this will work. Okay, so people, you're about to see this screen come up. Could somebody just quickly confirm that this is visible in the chat window? I am putting it on present everyone. Just let me know that you can see what is here, and I will begin. Type away, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, good. So we're up and running. This is a document I called the, oh, it will get bigger, never fear. This is the document I called the Dead Asleep Combinator. This was a tool, again, that I designed to share with my friends. And so now I'm sharing it with all of you, and to serve as a basis for my own consideration. So as further orientation or context, we have in Shakespeare, "'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub." We have Charles Manson supposedly saying this. I heard this quote through Tim: "Death must be the best trip of all because they save it for last." And a quote that I cannot yet source that I heard through Tim, which is that death is the other half of your life. So the speculation in this document is a result of considering relationships between the following pairs as a way to move from the known to the unknown. You have wakefulness and sleep, life and death, cause and effect, deed and judgment, exertion and rest. And now this gives you the idea of a sequence. And this is where I want to look at it a little more closely. Most people consider periods of sleep and wakefulness as things that happen one after another. So we can look at, I'll make the image bigger for you here. You know, everybody hopefully can see this. This is normally how we think about it, right? We're asleep, then we're awake, then we're asleep, and then we're awake, etc., etc., etc. And this is a pretty straightforward way to think about it. And this is how most of us consider it when we're not really considering it. You know, we say, well, we're asleep, period of wakefulness, you know, period of sleep, period of wakefulness, period of sleep. Well, that only gets you so far. There's one thing to note here, though, is that there is a one-way line, right? It's very important that this is in duration. This is the successive passage of moments, right? And this is how the typical way we consider it works. Well, see here, it's like links in a chain. You've got a durational sequence indicated by the arrow, as I said. So it suggests that given the constraints of the model, dreams during periods of sleep may utilize sense impressions from the preceding days or periods of wakefulness. This seems to be the case sometimes. We've all noticed how, you know, you have bits of experience from the day before and they get shuffled up in your mind, and, you know, they come together. You can tell that they somehow form the material that, how do I say it, that your dreams are chewing on. And the correspondence to experience here ties into this alternating succession model, except for stuff that can't be accounted for. So look at the idea that you can glimpse the future in dreams. Well, that's when our alternating succession model gets screwed up. You're like, well, wait a minute, there's a one-way line, and the things that have fed into our awareness, that provide a raw material or prima materia for our dreams to chew through. That's one thing, but it's a very different thing to have this idea that you saw your future, the future of some kind, in your dreams. And the first thing we have to do is take this alternating succession model and look at it a little bit more closely, right? So even though we have this idea that we're asleep and then awake and asleep and then awake, the reality is that that one line of wakefulness is continuing and we have broken off from it. So this model becomes a little more useful to consider it this way. Well, we still have the line, right? But the reality is that we come back into a world and we come back in later. There was a time when we were not here, but presumably that line continues in the background. So your girlfriend may come in and say, man, you snore like a fucking pig, and you're like, oh, well, that was when I was asleep, and this is when this other timeline was continuing to move, right? And so here we have the idea that this period of being asleep is maybe perpendicular to this other line. It has features of its own that are rather odd. So that's one angle. And let's see. Despite the fact that periods of wakefulness are invariably broken into segments by continuous successive periods of sleep, we still tend to think of them as forming a continuous series. This is what I was just talking about. We imagine ourselves sleeping through the continuing sequence of duration, feeling little doubt regarding whether or not the waking world continues while we sleep. Despite the Heraclitan suggestion that we cannot step into the same river twice, that is what we seem to do each morning when we awaken. The new day is part of a sequence with the previous day locked in the past and the coming day ahead somewhere in the future. We see waking life as being continuous based on duration, and periods of sleep as being discontinuous. That's why it's useful to look at this model here with the perpendicular black sections, because these are not continuous. You can step into different worlds. But that gets to be a little bit troublesome when you try to account for the fact that sometimes in your dreams, you go back to a place that you have seen in your dreams before. And that has happened to me many times. Like there's a city of bone. It's all yellowed and cracking. And you can see the massive weight of the layers of this city, which is just sort of stratum upon stratum of crumbling, yellowed bone buildings, and it's creaking and splintered and crazed with fractures. I've been to it several times in my dreams, and every time I go back, I think to myself, yeah, I've been there before. So we know that, oh, wow, okay, this would seem to be discontinuous, except maybe that's not how it works. Maybe we have two lines with parallel continuity, and that would be more like this. So we think about awake and asleep, and then you have the idea of the waking world and the world, where you sleep, or where the place to which you go while you are asleep in the world that you would normally call waking. So if we imagine periods of sleep in a continuous sequence in order to account for this dream phenomena, we arrive at the model of parallel continuity, as I mentioned. This model is useful in that it shows the continuity of wakefulness and sleep, as well as showing through the secondary arrows the relationship between one state and the other. Each period of wakefulness is succeeded by a period of sleep that can include scraps of sense impression or experience from the preceding time awake. But now this, what do you got? Bedwetter questions going in the background? That happens when the children are abused or in fear of physical violence. It's related to when a puppy rolls over on its back and wets itself when faced with a big dog that is threatening and frightening to it. Little children do that in order to make themselves clearly infantile and therefore not a threat to the male. It's what children do when they're deeply worried about being hurt by males in their environment. Okay, so coming back to this, leaving aside this bedwetting sidebar. So we've got this idea of parallel continuity, but we have problems with that. So one of the issues that you have with this parallel continuity notion is it doesn't allow for the idea of prophetic dreams that we already brought up. And furthermore, dreams are sometimes related to other dreams that have happened before. Such sequential orientation arising from the point in the waking sequence at which we anchored the dream in a sequential order. But in themselves, dreams seldom have a durational order such as we experience when we're awake. So this has happened to me a lot. I imagine it's happened with many of you. You have dreams where they seem to come full circle. So, you know, like right before you wake up, you come back to the beginning of the dream, right? And you're like, oh yeah, I woke up right when I came back to the part of the dream where it all started. So clearly, the idea of having a parallel durational line, you know, like we see in this with the red awake sequence and the black asleep sequence, clearly that does not really work. In terms of, you know, this model doesn't account for the things like prophetic dreams. Or maybe you've had dreams where, you know, it seems as though it's happening over and over again. You know, I know in situations I'd be in some event in a dream and there's a friend there, and that friend is first one person, and then a little later in the dream it's a different person, but you know it's still the same friend. And the same happens with places. You know, you're in one place and then you're in another place, but you know it's two different versions of the same place. Well, this happens with the idea of time. So the dream state cannot be ordered in the same way as our waking experiences. You know, as in the case of dreams being ordered in duration, based on when they occurred relative to the sequential order of our waking experience. So it would seem somehow that we project or impose an order of our own on the dream state. So you see, this is, it's kind of hard to get across, but let me see if I can explain what I'm talking about. Doubtless some of you have grasped it already, but it's the idea that there's an order here to wakefulness, and somehow our habits of mind somehow project that structure. In this case, I just made it simple to look like a triangle, and then it flips over into this sleep state. But it seems to me like there is always this aspect of us attempting to give a sequence to our dream. Like when I've spent considerable amounts of time being very serious about recording my dreams, you know, when I was working with lucid dreaming and I was playing, you know, in high school with this idea of astral projection and everything, I kept a very regular dream journal. And, you know, I would pop awake and try to write down everything that went on in the dream. And it's very strange. You're like, well, I know this happened, but I'm not sure, did it happen before or after this? I can't be sure, you know, and this, along with what I talked about, the same place or the same time, but you're doing it again, or this friend who has a different face, but you know it's the same friend. It seems to me that we take normative aspects of manifestation in space and time, and we project them into this sleeping state. But we do so retroactively upon waking. It's almost as though in order for the memories in the dream to make their way into our conscious awareness in the waking world, they have to be shoehorned in to this linear sequence that's easier for us to grasp. Okay, so let me see what else we have here from the notes. So yes, this figure suggests that through the use of geometric figures, or suggests through the use of geometric figures, how we project spatial and temporal experience of wakefulness into the dream state in order to make it memorable and communicable. But this projection is always a technique of only limited effectiveness. It seems likely that the reason dreams can be so difficult to remember has as much to do with the absence or exceeding of durational ordering, such as we experience in wakefulness. In my own experience of recording dreams, I've noticed that to a certain degree, the act of transcribing them orders it and makes it accessible. This is the stuff that I just mentioned to you. The key point here, though, is to hammer on the idea that it makes it memorable and communicable, which means it fits into our own personal structures of identity formed by our memories. And by extension, it can then in some fashion be shared with others. So while dreams can sometimes exhibit a durational order that's experienced in state, in my own experience, it seems safer to assert that the dream experiences resolve themselves into something like durational order on waking so they can be remembered. So this brings us to another model that I think has value relative to all of this. And this involves looking at it like this. Remember, all of this in the end is asleep and awake. Eventually, we're going to come around and play with some of these models relative to life and death. So here we have this, awake asleep arrangement, but you see it's like the circumference. It's a circle. And let me see what the value is. Seems most useful to employ this model showing the durational order of waking experiences while also suggesting the elusive possibility of comprehensible order in the dream state. But it's an order that the waking state spatial and temporal assumptions cannot accurately reflect. So here you have the idea that we were talking about, by having the ring, we still have a sequence in waking life. Here it happens to move clockwise, around the periphery. But the idea is that it touches something that is perhaps not ordered in the same way as we have been discussing. And you'll notice one of the aspects of it being set up in the center there, it's kind of a way of graphically showing how access to the dream state would give you access to any of the points in your durational sequence because it exists outside of it. So if all of duration occurs out on the, let's call it the rim of the wheel, but the closer you get to the hub of the wheel, the closer you get to timelessness, or time as a dimension of its own, distinct from duration, depending on how you want to approach it. At this point, you kind of have a way of graphically viewing it that provides some kind of an explanation for how in your dreams you could sort of touch all these different things in the past and the future that otherwise have to be experienced by you on a line of duration in your waking life as a sequence. So the idea that durational experience serves to anchor experiences that are synchronic or achronic, thereby making them accessible to memory, suggests new interpretations for the Aldine imprimatur. I just like this. This is a memory image for me. By looking at the anchor here, let me see if I can make that bigger. This is the printer's emblem of Aldus Manutius, and it's the swiftly darting dolphin wrapped around the stable anchor. And so the idea is being swift, but also being slow. And it's usually paired with a Latin motto that says festina lente, make haste slowly. And I like it because it's a hidden bit of the larger circle formed by the curve of the anchor. And you have the hub that's really in the center. And you have simultaneously the idea of motion and motionlessness. It was just a side thing I was chewing on as I put all of this together. Now, where it gets interesting is to take a look at waking state and dream state as a speculative conceptual model. So we can look at a couple new ways of this awake, asleep, life, death kind of thing. One of these models that I was playing with is this. Where is it now? Come now, ladies and gentlemen. This. I don't know how big I can make that. But you have a, yeah, it's as big as it gets, I think. Yeah, sorry. Hopefully you guys can see it. But the blue squares say alive, the red squares say awake. And the black is that crossover, which is presumably a liminal space or state that exists equally between lives as it does between waking moments. And then there is another model that we play with, or I play with here. I'm not playing with myself. Ooh, is that bigger? Oh yeah, now you can see that well, right? That should be visible to you for what I was trying to play with there. Okay, and another one is this one. So these again are attempts to take the stuff that we have been discussing thus far about wakefulness and sleep and trying to link it to life and death so that we can get a more complete model here, or one that takes into account both these periods of wakefulness and sleep and the periods of life and death. These figures help us to imagine new approaches to the phenomenon of dreams and death. For example, men have long held that at the end of life, we will be judged based on the actions we have taken. Similarly, at the end of each day, we consider events before going to sleep, and then our emotional relations and sub or unconscious reactions to the day's events emerge as a part of the dream landscape, as though embodied in it and its characters. To me, anyway, this seems very similar to the idea that sins or virtuous behavior determines our punishment. So we've got the medieval trope of the memory loci and images from the art of memory. Hopefully some of you will have learned something about that since it's been mentioned so many times. The medieval trope with the memory loci and images utilizes the idea of an interior seal or stamp in the matter of consciousness, resulting from sense experience and the emotional intentio, the intention behind the feelings behind the impression that is made. That's some technical stuff that I don't want to go into here, but I've mentioned it in past stuff in the EZO series. So as our sense experience translates into a process of reflection, distortion actually, given the emotional color that's added to the experience, based on the misunderstandings that are necessary for individuals to differentiate themselves. And that goes into the alchemical idea of tincture, which originally meant a dye, but we don't have time to get into all that either. So our memories are populated with the fruits of our virtue or sin. So it's almost as though we can taste little bits of what's coming in our afterlife during our periods of sleepfulness. So you get people who have lots of nightmares all the time. Clearly they're anxious, and clearly there is a sense of judgment within them in their internal world that does not bode for well for them when it comes to the reckoning they must undertake with they themselves, with their self with a capital S, when the time comes for them to kick a dirt nap. So this populated memory, this reflection of behavior, self-criticism, misunderstanding, and judgment. Let me see here, I can open this back up because I'm not just going to read it to you. I'll let you look at my beautiful face. How do I stop this? Okay. Can you guys see me again? Hopefully you can. So this populated memory, this memory that's been populated as a result of both what you experienced and, equally important, how you felt about it. So this, thank you for the confirmation, you can see this. So this memory, again, populated by the images formed as a result of your sense impressions, but also, equally important, formed and taking visible shapes or experienceable shapes in dream life based on how you felt about what happens. Again, it's not just what you experience that forms this interior imagery, it's how you felt about it. And that's the emotional charge that goes with whether or not you yourself felt that your actions were a virtue or a vice. And that determines whether or not pillows are being fluffed for you or knives are being sharpened for you when you come before the tribunal of yourself within yourself, to have you yourself, with a capital S, render judgment upon the actions you have taken or the things you have not done. So this populated memory, this reflection of behavior, self-criticism, misunderstanding, and judgment, this reckoning of the inner eye of conscience or consciousness, is the landscape experienced at intervals through dreams while the body sleeps. This landscape is most likely experienced as a physical reality for the consciousness without a body to return to, i.e. the consciousness of a person deceased. In the case of dreams, one returns after a fixed period of duration, at least from the perspective of the sleeping body. One can also wake up from a particularly shocking nightmare, rejecting it, so to speak. You can jump up and say, it was just a dream. On the other hand, it seems unlikely that we can wake up from our own private interior hell, And perhaps the bad dreams we have are glimpses of the hell that we have made for ourselves within the stuff of ourselves in the imagery of our soul, based again, not just upon what we experienced, but how we felt about it. In any case, to escape it by manifesting a body would require, leaving aside trong jog and other Tibetan techniques where you steal someone else's body. It would require 2 appropriate copulating parties and a delay for the growth of the body to a sufficient degree, allowing the full consciousness to seat. Like we talked about before, babies initially can't focus their eyes. You don't have full nervous control over your musculature. Furthermore, the new body would have its own relationships, hormonal, scent-based, and genetic. I mean, the body has those relationships with its mother and presumably with members of its family. And these can be detected through scent, olfactory stuff. These can be detected before consciousness really even seats in the body. So you arrive with a new web of relationships that you're chemically aware of before you even have full self-consciousness. You've got different family members, different environmental features. Again, this goes back to the river of Lethe. And ladies and gentlemen, we're getting close to the end here. I won't drone endlessly. So a human life, at least from a human perspective, seems to be the only integrated and coherent unit of memory. Discontinuity between units is the most significant barrier to continuity of memory. This returns us to the image of the anchor and the idea that we order our dreams based on our waking experience. What order can they or would they have in the absence of our concrete spatial and durational experience? I have 2 eyes, therefore I have depth perception. It's that gives me depth, which helps to build my experience of space. I have 2 ears, which means I can triangulate sound. I know if they're happening to the right or to the left of me. I stand up perpendicular to the flat plane of the earth, right? Each of these things is how space is created for me. And then that space that I recognize because of things like the depth perception and the ability to triangulate sound in space, that corresponds to the impression that my interior soul stuff takes, or the material of the imaginal realm takes from sense experience. So only by operating out here in the world with this, which is a gift of God that I operate in and through, that allows me to take an impression of space, and then that impression of space kind of like this diagram. Well, I'm not going to do screen share again, but you remember the one with the triangle and how it flips over and you impose the order into the interior based on what you go through out here. That becomes a foundation for space to bloom within us until we can walk in this borrowed flesh that we must return, ashes to ashes and all the rest, that is loaned to us for a time. Until we had this tool, we didn't have what we needed to populate our interior with space because we had not experienced space, time, and all the rest. And so with the training wheels of experience, we populate our interior. Let me see here. Do I really want to go into all of this stuff? I'd just be droning at you. I think the gist of what I've laid out here is enough to get you thinking on your own, and that's the only goal. None of this is presented as though it's Oliver's secret wisdom that he has discovered. I just want to show you, my viewers, the way my mind works when I want to tackle a problem. This is when I was playing with ages ago. I don't even remember. What is this? 2007. So 11 years ago. And I've fiddle fucked with it since a few times. But there it is, the dead asleep combinator, and the idea of parallels between sleep and wakefulness and life and death. All right. So now I will review a few of these comments and see if there are any of them I can quickly tap on. John Ski says, my dad near the end of his life would say that death is just like falling asleep. You don't know you've died, just like you don't know you've fallen asleep. You're just asleep/dead. I think there's something to that. And I think it's possible to imagine within one's interior that one is still alive out here in the macrocosm, the loaned space made of the stuff of God. And then there's our own little kingdom of God within us that is shaped based on reflecting the stuff of divinity. And that's when you get to ask yourself, does the reflection in the mirror really exist? When we polish the mirror of memory and of the soul, such that the images of manifestation, which is the substance of God, are reflected without distortion, without tincture, colorless and clear, well, then we perfectly reflect God. And to the extent that the reflection of God is perfect, to whatever extent it can be, right? With all that whole long chain of theological caveats granted, we exist insofar as we accurately reflect God, which is the only thing that is, but it only exists the way a reflection in a mirror does, which is to say it's a contingent existence. Anyway, these things get very, very interesting to consider. Waterpenny says, so a translation or transmogrification of the dream state is required to order the non-physical experience upon waking. Yes, quite. Yes, that is precisely the idea. One Jewish toenail is worth more than the entire, right? Oh my God. Oh my God. Thoughts on sleep paralysis? I've been through sleep paralysis a few times. Kind of drives me crazy. Now I know enough about it, but there's a particular kind I get or have gotten where you're sitting there and you want to wake up and you know that you're asleep, but you usually have, or I often have this thing where I'm coming out of the dream and you think you've woken up, but you haven't. And it can be stressful. It can be alarming. You tend to get a little worried when you're like, I need to wake up. I need to wake up. And you'll do something like make some superhuman effort to wake up, and somehow, or from somewhere is through a glass darkly, or, as though you're listening to it through big bags full of wool, you'll hear your sleeping self drooling and go, blah, blah. And you think you're shouting in your dream. Yeah, it seems that is, it's a consistent enough experience that I think it does have something to do with the consciousness operating independently, not entirely independently, but because that's the whole nature of the problem, but to some extent or in some ways independently of the body. And there's some sort of crossed wire thing going on where you end up with problems bringing it all online. And I know with a lot of people, it's associated with nightmares. For me, it can be associated with anything, with things that could be described as nightmarish, or at least in the past when I was younger, all the way over to just this infuriating inability to wake up when you want to. And you just feel like you're trapped in a loop. Okay. Johnsky asks, yes, but are you aware you've died? Or are you aware you're asleep, or awake for that matter? I don't know. I think it depends. It depends on the degree of awareness that one brings to the process. I think there's some ways in which it can happen that it's seamless, and you lose the idea of a focused self, the seeing eye, as it were. The idea of objective, subjective, having an observer. But that's like point consciousness and field consciousness, and it gets over into all kinds of other crazy shit, which we'd be talking for hours about if I really opened up on that topic. And I'm not sure that I am ready to at this point. So we are here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to let you guys think of some questions you want to ask, and we can spend the second half of this call or a clip or whatever it is answering questions that you might come up with. Current events I've been looking at pretty closely. We can talk about news, or if there are specific topics or anything that occurred to you in the course of me talking. What is this little grays? What is this little grays thing everyone is talking about? Please tell me. Stealth Creations ask, ever think that one of the quickest ways to kill the cringy, abortion-loving mob of feminists is to have trans women infiltrate and shout their opinions about the subject? I think it'd be funny, and they deserve it, whether it would work or not. To be honest with you, the abortion thing really just doesn't bother me. I'm not bothered that someone else is bothered, but I just don't give a shit. Suck them out with vacuum cleaners, grind them up into paste, sell them as creams. I do not give a fuck. I don't understand why everybody's so worked up about it. It's a lot like the blackface. Do dreams in your sleep require connection in your waking experience? Asks Joey the Delight. I think yes, in the sense that I've talked about. You wouldn't even be able to think of yourself and other or sense objects as distinct from you without space, without subjectivity, without reflexive self-awareness, and all of those things come out of manifesting. It's kind of like the Aristotelian idea that knowledge is all a result of experience. Even if you're imagining a Platonic parallel realm, construed in the loosest possible sense. The idea is that that parallel realm is a kind of prima materia that is only shaped upon exposure to the proper archetype, which is the reflection that we all seek to more perfectly reflect. And somehow there's a moment when we reflect it perfectly that the looking glass springs to life and we can step through it. But yeah, the gray ones, aliens, extraterrestrials, that's not my, I'm not big into the alien thing. So I don't know if I can offer an opinion there. Have I read Robert Monroe's Astral Projection? Yeah, I think I read that book as a teenager in high school. How do you dream lucidly? You have to, in my experience, you have to kind of program yourself for it. First off, you build up to paying attention to your dreams by keeping a record of them, which involves assiduously waking up and getting everything down that you can. And after weeks or months of doing that with care, simply pointing your awareness, your attention towards that thing tends to cause it to become more responsive to you and your interests. And I found, just as a matter of course, that I began to like wake up in the dreams. I was doing this as a teenager though, so I'd like pop awake in a dream, and the first thing I was is like, I want to conjure some gorgeous woman to fuck. And I was a teenage male, and it was just infuriating because I could arrange it, and then as soon as any of it became sexually interesting, the dream kind of pushed me out of itself. It's just insane. Everybody talks about wet dreams and stuff. That never happened with me, at lucid dreaming or otherwise. It was as soon as the interest in the dream became too intense and I began to do things like trying to create features and the rest, it was just like being pushed slower and slower, more and more quickly up to the edge of something where you're just going to drop off. I try to scrabble and cling to the dream state, and it would just eject me. Like, a splinter 2 days later when you're looking at it and it goes, hink, the body just shoves the splinter out. In the same way, my consciousness would eject itself from the dream state because of the fact that I was becoming conscious in it. But, other people have different ways that they talk about what happened to them. All right. Let's see. Reference to episodes of sleep paralysis. Glad my mom was not into abortion. Yeah, me too. I'm not saying I would abort my own children, but I just really, I don't care. I don't really care. Okay. Why are we unable to remember dreams we just woke up from, but other dreams we can vividly remember? Your guess is as good as mine, man. Though I have seen consistently that if you pay attention to it and keep a record of it and bother with it on your own, it unfolds, gets more intense, more clear. You can remember more. I mean, I was waking up and writing down 7 or 8 pages every morning. I mean, I was doing it by pen back then. I foolishly was recording them. I'd wake up and I'd, say it into, back in those days, we had the little mini cassette recorders, and I would record it. But I don't recommend that to anyone, because then you're stuck. If you ever want to use it, you've got to transcribe it. Now, if you had a program like, Dragon Dictator, whatever the hell they call them, I might start using that again, because to be able to wake up in the morning and say it and then have it transcribe automatically, now that could be useful and might even get me off my ass to play games with lucid dreaming again. Okay, how many people are in this damn thing, man? I haven't even seen. What am I doing? Boomer Tech, alert, danger, Will Robinson. I'm somewhere around here. However many of you fuckers there are, mash the like button. Make yourself useful. Let me know that I am loved. Where is my window? Ah, there we go. 75 watching now. Yes, click like. I think there are a bunch of other live streams going on, and it is, of course, a fancy ass Saturday night. Okay, it's 5 a.m. in Finland. What's happening here? I have no idea, man. I'm just running my mouth. Metsan otus. I wonder how you pronounce that A with 2 dots. Is it like an A with a circle above it with the Scandinavian languages, where it's more like oh, Metsound? Sleep paralysis. All right. Let's see here. If prophetic dreams are not interpreted, but you are forced to understand the dream after it happens, was it information sent coded or a form of shock control? I don't know if it's how the question was phrased, but I'm not quite sure how to answer that because I don't know what shock control is. Okay, so what other questions, ladies and gentlemen? I have a little bit of Coca-Cola left. I have a cigarette. If you guys are not bored shitless, we can talk further until 11. I'll let it be determined based on whether or not there is interest and questions coming through. All right. I've got a note here for sleep paralysis. Look up Dr. Michael Persinger. The God Helmut, lobes of brain fall out of sync. Cool, I will check it out. Pat Ashley says, I'm loved. Well, I'll take it where I can get it. Thank you. What else? 3 a.m. in Portugal. You guys talking about insomnia, man. I don't even go up till the sun comes up. I go to bed until the sun comes up. A dream log club. Then there are dreams you have of events that seem to actually happen at a later time. Yes, precisely the reason, Mr. John Ski, that I was attempting to lay this shit out with those diagrams, because I want to find some way to visualize how you could be in a sequence, a line of duration, and yet have an opportunity to see things that happen in the future. What do you have? Have I ever smoked a pipe? Yes, and there's a whole rack of pipes over here in the background. Let's see here. Great game. New theories. No, none as yet. I'm just trying to dig deeper and deeper into that question was from Movius Quotatius, some shit. I'm digging into the whole background for universal secular humanism, syncretism, cosmopolitanism, because I need to understand better where this is coming from. And I think that while there are aspects that you could blame parts of it on the activities of certain tribes, and there are many of them, and nations and groups and interest groups and Brahmins and whatnot. There's something specifically about what white people have done that has eventuated in all of this. And so after a fashion, I guess what I'm getting at is it's our own fucking fault. So I'm going to have to sort through those ideas on my own before I get to a point where I can properly answer new great game stuff. Okay, this guy's talking about pipes. We'll go through some pipes. Have I not been through pipes before? I felt like I did pipes on a live stream once before. All right, what do we got here? Church warden from my dad. This is good when you want to keep the pipe nice and cool, the smoke cool. This is one of my favorites because it draws very well. I find it to be a lovely pipe. It works nicely. Hangs light, easy. Good draw. This one, I need to get like an MG or a, Aston Martin or something, bug-eyed Sprite. This just begs a convertible, tiny 2-seater British sports car. Can't you just see me smoking that? A sports car. I love it. This is a great little compact pipe. Very fond of it. Now, since you brought up meerschaum and the rest and keeping it cool, of course, I have a number of meerschaum pipes, and they do keep things nice and cool. This one is a pre-Republic Peterson's that I've shown off before. This is a gift from Mr. Tim. This was made in Ireland before the Peterson's pipes got shitty, which happened when the Republic was formed, as I'm told. And it's got a sterling silver collar and everything, and it's beautiful meerschaum. The problem is it does not draw for shit. So if anyone is a proper pipe person who can tell me what I need to do, it's physically something in the stem. It's not a matter of cleaning it out. The passage has no obstruction and it's been cleaned thoroughly many times. It just doesn't draw for shit. And that is annoying because it's otherwise such a gorgeous pipe. So yeah, there are a bunch of pipes over here. Everybody's got to have a Turk's Head meerschaum. This one was my father's. Yes. And it's also nice to have the kind of pipes that you can just set on your desk. They just sit there neatly. You can set them down while you're smoking. So yes, many are the pipes. Let me put these away. Ask me about pipes, men pipes, pipes, mighty pipes. Let me set these down here for now and try not to shatter any of them on these tiles.
Yes, back to these questions. What do we have here for questions?
Bitched clean meerschaums. Pipes, man. I don't need any more excuses to smoke tobacco. Where am I originally from? My family is from New Orleans on both sides. Both sides of my family are New Orleanian. My father's side is French and German, and something from what's now the UK. It remains to be seen whether it's Irish, English, Scots, Welsh. I don't know. I mean, it's the last name is Osborne with no E, so Osborn. So yeah, families from New Orleans on both sides. Father's German, French, and something from the UK. And my mother's side, my mother's father was all Italian from Tuscany. His mother was from the north of Tuscany, I think, and his father was from the south, maybe, but both in Tuscany. And my mother's mother was Greek and German. So I'm like a quarter German and a quarter Italian and Greek and French and English or something mixed in there. That's me, yes. No, I am not in Germany. I'm in the United States. Menton is in the house. What's up, sir? That's my good friend, Mr. Matthews. As far as I know, yes, you can touch meerschaum with your fingers. Yes, my father's meerschaum does have, I think, an amber stem, and it's kind of cracked up. I also have a fine elephant ivory cigarette holder that needs to be repaired. So is the Cajun cook on TV a real accent? I don't know. Cajun accents are fucking weird if you've actually heard them. Thoughts on Marlboro stopping producing tobacco and moving to vaping? I don't know anything about that, but I know big cigarette companies have bought a lot of land up in Humboldt County, so they can use that for branding if they get to mass marketing of sales of marijuana, cannabis, whatever you want to call it. 3%er tells me I can try drilling out the stem. Yeah, I wonder what tool would be used for that, though. It would have to be something flexible that followed the route of what's there, and it would have to be very slow. I imagine it get hot, like gum up and stick. Surely there must be some, old-fashioned pipe master. If Miyamoto Musashi can find someone to sharpen his samurai sword, surely, I guess it probably went the way of like going to get a hat reblocked. But pipe specialists exist no longer. And whenever you go to one of the tobacco, cigar, and pipe stores, it's full of people who really don't know much about tobacco for the most part. People asking how old I am. I'm 47 years young. Old enough to know better and young enough not to care, as Mr. Rudisil would say. Meep is almost as much of a mutt as I am. I claim more mutt because I've got Greek blood, which means I've probably got a Turk in the woodpile. Yeah, I don't know about these eyebrows because they come from my dad's side, and my dad is German and French. And he had these massive eyebrows. Let's see here. Beeswax. Ollie went to school at the Masquerade, Matthew says. Yes, back in the day, working at silly, gothy punk rock nightclubs. But it was a kind of an education. Mr. Menton Matthews got himself a hell of an education in life, as did I. We're both lucky to still be alive. All right. I repair guns. I could fix a pipe. John Ski repairs guns? Really? Would you consider yourself a proper gunsmith? If so, we must discuss further. All right. Let's see. 40s are the new 40s. Right. How would I describe my politics? I believe in limited civic nationalism, which is to say I believe in limited ethnic nationalism. But that's an American thing. I don't endorse that for other countries that have a strong claim to being entirely ethno-nationalist countries and always have been. It's not something that needs to be innovated. They just need to return to what they've always done. Otherwise, I'm an elitist, an individualist of sorts, and I like the American system just the way it is. or modified, stripped back to its bones. I'm looking at this business of propertarianism now and wading through a heap of shit to get to what the kernels of insight are. Stay tuned. I have not yet figured that out. I'm an American. I mind my own business and expect the same. All right. I seen a guy do surgery on a grape. Someone's got to know about pipes. Right. All right. Where are we? Probably the French side with the eyes, with the eyebrows, certainly. My dad had very, very, very blue eyes, but he went gray-haired very young, as I did as well, and ended up with these giant eyebrows. Favorite guns for carrying, either or both of a combination. Smith & Wesson stainless steel 649 5-shot revolver with the camelback, you know, so you can, for example, if you had to, you can fire it from your pocket without it jamming up, but you can get your thumb on it to cock it for a double action shot. And warning to those who haven't used them, they have a real hair trigger when they're cocked, paired with a 1911 commander length slide. So yeah, I like a 45 commander and the Smith & Wesson 5-shot revolver. Although I do like the little Beretta jet fires and, you know, Minks 22 short and 25 ACP. They're cute little mouse gun, you know, get them off you guns. But favorite guns, yeah, 1911, and I've only ever had the commander length ones. I've had them in steel as well as, you know, scandium alloy frames, and yeah, steel 38s. I don't like alloys and things. I'd rather have to deal with the weight at my waist, but have it be solid. I have reluctantly gone over to, as I said, scandium commander, just because it's so much lighter. So much lighter. It's just, instead of carrying a brick on your waist, but I still have all steel. So yeah, 1911 probably is my favorite handgun. I'm not claiming that it's the be all end all, and I get all the Glock, all the Glock people, no fighting words, but not interested. And in terms of long guns, I haven't done enough with them. I have a few, but I don't know enough to say I have a favorite other than a 22. All right, what else do we have here? Do I have any children? No. Or am I supposed to say not that I know of? Man, but I could have. If I wasn't trying to avoid them when I was a lad, man, and they would be beautiful. The problem is that their mothers would all be insane, and they would have turned out just fucked up because of how fucked up I was and how fucked up their mothers would have been. But yeah, wow. I almost had children with any number of very attractive young women, but I figured out how not to end up in that situation over and over again by the time I was 19. So yeah, John Ski says, I thought you're a 1911 guy. Yeah, I picked that up from Tim the very first time I ever handled his Colt blued Commander Series 70. I was like, holy shit, I want one. And so I moved up through, I had a Colt, had a Ruger. I think now I still have a Colt, but it's one of the 1991s. I had to put the spacer in there so it doesn't have the, you know, the plunger drop safety, which I don't like because of how it affects the trigger. But I still have it, and I have a Ruger stainless steel, you know, the SR 1911 commander length again, and I have one of the whatchamacallit, the SC 1911, the scandium frame Smith & Wesson. All right, what do we got here? What about rifles? I like some 22s. Menton says, I'm pretty sure I'm the closest thing to Oliver having a kid. Dude, you were young when I met you, but so was I, man. When I met him, he was, I think, 14 or 15, and I was 19. Well, we're good old friends, man. You were by no means. Especially, it'd be creepy if you were like a kid, because I've been blown up onto your doorstep after being kicked about by the winds of fortune, and you were kindly taking care of me. What about rifles? I got some 22s, you know, Marla Model 60, Remington Speedmaster. I've got what else? A M1 carbine, Saginaw, I think it is, 1943. Shotguns and stuff. I'm thinking about that. For a long gun, I'm probably just going to stick with 22s, but if I am going to get one, I'm now in the midst of this big thing. Either I'll get one of the Springfield Armories, the 308s, 7.62 by 51, I think it is, or whatever. And I'll probably get that in a scout model or a full length model, or I'll get a Galil Ace, and I'm not even sure what the caliber will be. With 7.60 by 49, you can get the ammunition pretty cheap, and it has a little bit more of a punch. But then you're like, well, 5.56 has such a nice flat trajectory. But then my Army buddies are like, they tell me what happened when they got a grain of sand in the bolt. So I don't know. I'm thinking about it. But in the meantime, I always have any number of 22s and boxes of 22 ammunition. What else? A Dremel with a tiny bit. Maybe you could do that. Somebody mentioned Walter PPKS. I had one. I did not like it. It's very hot in the hand, even though it's a little 380. It jumps in the hand, even all steel. It's very uncomfortable to shoot. Pretty gun, and it was fairly reliable, but I went into it. Hudson 9. I've been thinking about a 1911 in 9mm. I have to check it out. I've seen some of the Wilson Combat pistols they put together. They're just gorgeous. I don't know if I want to spend $5,000 on a handgun now. My astrological sign. I am a Leo rising with moon in Cancer, and no, I'm sorry, Leo rising. My ascendant is Cancer. My moon is in Pisces, and Venus is in Leo, and Mercury is in Virgo. I can't remember all of it. I'd have to pull up my astrological chart. Pass my DNA, Ollie. Yeah, I'll be happy to pass my DNA if there's a proper female. But dude, that's the thing, man. You don't want to reproduce with a woman unless she's fucking top drawer, unless she's of the first water. She's got to have her shit together because she matters for the child more than you do. Absolutely important. You have to have the finest, most sensible, brave, solid, strong, not lazy kind of woman. And that's just to be a good mother. Then you're thinking whether she's going to put up with me or, be boring to me, or I'm going to seem like an Asperger's freakazoid to her. It's just a mess. We'll see. Okay. Is that a Cossack uniform in the background? No, but I've been moving it around. I think in my different clips, I want to have it in different positions, closer and further away, like it's orbiting me, which is why I pulled it closer. It's the basis for Cossack uniforms. It's from the Caucasus. It is Circassian or Georgian or Chechen. The whole area, they all use the same types of outfits. It's only the the Cossacks recently claimed it. Let's see here. A Brazilian-made Beretta Jetfire as a channel donation. I think it'd be safer for me to just buy that straight up from you. But I think you told me, man, that it has the safety on it, and I really want one of the older. Well, we'll talk about it. Thank you. It's very kind of you to suggest. And yeah, and you have to tell me whether you're a proper gunsmith, because I need a gunsmith. There's one in town where I live who's actually quite good, but he's getting a little old and weird around the edges. So I end up having to wait around a long time to get stuff finished. Advertising trends that I was a part of. The future of advertising. I don't know. It's all been happening around me. It's not anything, so much that is specific to me in any way. I mean, there's stuff with scent advertising. There's all the television shit that's going on, social media communications that have burgeoned. All the digital stuff sort of appeared during my arc of trajectory working professionally. What's another big trend? This whole thing of woke capital. The idea that you have to stand for something other than selling your products is something that sort of appeared during my transit through the hellfires of advertising. All right, let's see here. What's going on here? Oliver, do you think you're maybe too picky on women? No, they're just as picky with me, man. Don't be a racist, Ollie. Build a black rifle. Um, I don't know, man. I'm a big believer in what Tim is saying, which is that just attracts all kinds of attention. I might buy one, might build one, but Tim's a big fan of the 22 long rifle for good reasons. I might do Volkartzen or whatever, make some pretty badass 22 Magnum rifles that you can get custom built, which I'm thinking about. All right, let's see here. I need a black or Mexican wife. No, not now. Although to be honest with you, man, I'll take whatever shit for it. If I meet someone I can marry and they're of some other color, I'll just stop and be like, oh my God, I'll take it where I can fucking get it. I'm dating the Palm Sisters. Listen to you. Who here would pay real money to have videos of Oliver going on Tumblr and Bumble dates? Full 2-hour documentary. I'll make free music for it. Fuck you, Menton. By the way. Oh man, if that was anyone else, he'd be permanently banned. Unfortunately, I have to fucking put up with him because he's such an old friend. What is my number one interest hobby? I don't know, man. It used to be flamenco, but I haven't been doing it as much. I just got a heavy bag and I'm working out with the heavy bag downstairs. And it's interesting to take what I learned from dance and apply it to boxing. So it's like all the time I'm thinking about footwork, which is interesting, but probably dance, flamenco, and research, just studying. I want to get back into my research about marks and marking behavior and all of that. Silvana Yvonda says, I feel sleepy listening to you talking. I'm going to take that as a compliment and say thanks, I think. What do we got here? Ooh, that's true. Microchain or braided steel wire to bore out the pipe. Microchain would probably be too jagged, so to speak. But yeah, braided steel wire, that could work. And I just have to get the right diameter. Cooch to 69, rock and roll, man. Oliver, do I think the Catholic Church committed genocide against the wise men of Europe by putting them in monasteries for hundreds of years, leading to a society dominated by warriors and merchants? Nah, I don't know. I'm thinking about that right now. I'm comparing it. I'm looking at practices from these different religious movements and how they tackle reproduction as a basis for comparison. So like, with the Catholic Church, you have the idea that the priesthood is not supposed to marry or reproduce, but they're heavy into encouraging the reproduction of the lay people, right? No birth control, every sperm is sacred. If you go over to the Eastern Church, Orthodox churches of various varieties, from what I can tell, I'm no expert. They do allow married priests, or many of the divisions do. But from what I've seen, if they're married and then become a priest, it's acceptable. But if their wife dies when they are a priest, they're not supposed to remarry. So it's kind of like they put up with it, but they don't encourage it. But from what I can tell, Muslims, they encourage children. They have multiple wives, so they're probably more hardcore about reproduction as a strategy of domination than even the Catholics are. And so lay people and the holy men can do it. I want to get the background on the subdivisions of Judaism as well, because I want to put them all out on a chart and see how they approach reproduction, because I think it will tell us some things. Because ultimately, I'm going to take all of that and compare it to what I think of as the current secular religion, the religion that masquerades under the ragged, flopping, bloody sheepskin as being secular, because it involves abortion and pushing to have some groups not reproduce. You see my interest in this. If you encourage poor people in general, including whites, as well as poor non-whites, to have children, but you try to do everything you can to make middle class or educated, college educated, if you will, white people not have children and to be afraid of it. There's a strategy. That's why I want to lay out the different religions and then put them next to the modern thing that is a religion but pretends not to be, because then you can kind of get a view for what types of reproduction is being retarded, what types of reproduction, I should say are, not is, are being promoted. I think it will be interesting. So I can't answer Patrick Doiron's, if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't mean to mangle your last name. I can't answer that question fully yet because I'm still looking into it, but I am looking into it now. My favorite marking, or the most interesting, well, you saw one of them next to the anchor was the Camargue cross. So yeah, that's something it's an anchor cross in Catholicism. I also like the sword of Santiago Matamoros. Yes, many. But there's basically, I went into all of that because I was trying to understand so-called occult symbols. And I never saw anybody just go all the way back to the origins of signs and writing to just settle it for once. So I kind of had to do that. I can put 3 rounds in a face-sized target at 600 yards with my 260 Remington AR-10 in under 10 seconds. It's black. Nice. And you know, in terms of accuracy, I'm thinking I'll just get like one of those, it's a Remington 700, get it like, 270, bolt action. Anyway, how do we end up back to guns? All right. What do I think of Varg Vikernes' philosophy? I don't know it, so I can't comment on it. What do I think of Slavoj Žižek's philosophy? Old Slavoj Žižek is interesting sometimes. Like it's fun to look at some of his things where he applies his postmodern hermeneutic to films and things, trying to understand what's going on in the background. But he's such a slobbering commie that there's only a certain amount of it that I can put up with. Louis XVI is announcing that Catholics massacred the Huguenots in Paris on St. Bartholomew's Day in 1572. Yes, indeed, they did. Have I ever read The New Inquisition by Robert? No, I have not. Goyrel Gone Wild says you can invent a fighting style combining flamenco and boxing and call it floxing. Nice. Polygamy increases the odds for causing marriage. Do I go out for protests or for fighting Antifa? Is this a Fed trying to figure out everything about me? I live in the South in the United States. And no, I don't generally get involved in big public events because that's usually a fool's errand or asking for trouble. Anton Wilson, Robert Anton Wilson. No, he was big back in the day when I was into all the Magic Boy stuff, and research was coming out, and it was modern primitives, and everybody was doing the Fact Sheet 5 occultist thing. Robert Anton Wilson was really big. I think I read a few pages of it, but it just never did anything for me. Is this the Kung Fu style I study? I don't study Kung Fu. All right. I have to get back to work. Talk to you soon from Menton. I imagine he is, I'd say burning the midnight oil, but he's probably painting the midnight oil. Thanks for dropping in, brother. Be well. All right. Am I preparing for civil war? I'm prudent. I have contingencies in place. What do I think of Tim Rudisville's philosophy? It has formed a model for me to explore and develop my own. And certain pieces of it I've taken over whole. Others, I've set to one side because we're a little different. But in general, it's less his philosophy is less interesting to me than the opportunity to have an example of someone who actually lives by what they believe and then can articulate and discuss what it is that they believe and tell you about how they arrived there. It's just nice to know someone who's not bullshitting. I've seen enough of him, and it's a great joy in life to see someone who says what they mean and then acts like it, and does what they say they're going to do. All right. True, Zizek's an idealist with little practical advice, but I do think he's better than most modern philosophers because he changes his mind often and is open to experimental approaches. I suppose. I mean, he's clearly bright, and some of his stuff is interesting, but god damn, he makes me want to stick knitting needles in my eyes when I hear him speak. Literally, anybody wants to just look at a Zizek interview, and it's like all he does is slobber. I'm a Fed old with 8 kids. Right on. It reminds me, I went on a date with some FBI chick when I was hanging around in Northern Virginia, and I only found it, I asked her out on a date, found out later she worked for the FBI, and she explained to me that her job was processing hands that were cut off of corpses and sent to her in paint cans so she could fingerprint them. My tax dollars at work. All right. What else do we have here? People really say what they mean and live it? No fucking way. Yes, sometimes. So if I studied the old Crusaders, what do you think was their main purpose? They wanted to fuck brunettes and get shit out of their system and put a feather in their religious cap and come home with lots of gold. Most of them were probably second and third and fourth sons. So they, couldn't look forward to inheriting anything of real value at home. So they were forced to go do what they did. What else? A disabled old Fed with 8 white babies. Bless your heart. I didn't mean to say anything bad about Feds. And rock and roll on 8 white babies. All right. Chomsky has lost credibility, or he never had any. I don't know, man. He's obviously a bright guy. And, when I was younger and was more kind of centrist, I hung out with lefties and didn't feel put out except when they bitched about guns. I'm like, you cowardly bitches. Why are you afraid of firearms? And I could listen to some Chomsky and be like, yeah, he's got a point. Now I hear him and it's just like commie whine, instead of hearing the Charlie Brown sounds of, all I hear is whining commie shit. All right. Which women should men stay away from? Any good stories? Oh, man. You should get Menton back on this stream. He's the only person who's been anywhere near as unlucky as I've been. Stay away from ones who have multicolored hair, like green, yellow, red, and purple, like I've talked about in previous clips, who then have sheets of construction paper of the same colors as their dyed patches of hair put on their wall. And then you look at the colored construction paper on the wall and the messages, and you're like, wow, all the purples sound a certain way, all the reds sound a certain way, all the yellows sounds a certain way. Oh wow, all those colors match what she dyed her hair. Oh, she's fucking schizophrenic, and this is her externalizing her behavioral features. In high school, I ended up with a woman who was a real live drunk. I was 16 and she was like probably 15 or 16, and she just would drink half a bottle of vodka and punch me in the eye. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin for types of women. Look for them and make sure that they're polite. Just see what they do when, and this is advice Tim gave me and it works great. See what they do when they're dealing with someone over whom they know that they have full power. So see how they treat a waitress, when you're out eating, or a valet guy or whatever, but whenever it's a situation where you know that the woman can imagine that she has freedom to do whatever she wants to someone who's socially beneath her in that specific circumstance, see how she behaves. And if she's anything other than honorable and upright, don't walk, run. Who am I and why is The Witcher taking over this channel? I'm going to have to play that video game at some point. Everybody talks about that crap. Apparently there's a movie that's going to happen. Chuck Stewart came in saying topic or anything goes. I'm just answering questions. We covered some topics in the first half. This started at 9. It will end at 11. So we have about 12 more minutes. And I am just rolling through answering questions with people because it is a Saturday night. Hoo-wee! Normsky, Chomsky, yes. So I'm an Islam supporter. I don't know where that question came from. What on earth made you think I'm an Islam supporter? Truth seeker. All right. I feel like I'm looking straight into the future. That from Roy Thomas Bauer. Why? Because you're seeing a gray old man. It's coming for you. Just wait. I recommend Zizek's books. All right, well, I'll keep an open mind. Excuse me. I had a hot blonde, but she was drunk as I found out at a crowded restaurant in a big commotion. Yes, isn't it fun to find out in a big commotion? Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing good about drunks, but when a woman's a drunk, oof, it's kind of like deep in your heart, you'd expect them to know better, you know? I like great thinkers who smoke weed. Uh, Margie says that's great advice. I'll tell my son that one. Yeah, look for just, they got to be, see how they treat people who are, you know, in their power. That's where you'll see how it rolls. That's what will reveal it. All right, what else? So the history of studies said nothing about the Crusaders was a big part of stopping the Muslim invasion of Europe. Sure, maybe they worried about it. You know, later crusades, like when the Turks were stopped twice at Vienna, that was definitely about stopping the invasions of the Muslims. And when Charles Martel came in, that was about stopping the invasions. But the major crusades that involved, you know, trying to retake Jerusalem. I mean, how many different crusades? There's at least one where they just went off and sacked Constantinople, a Christian city, for the hell of it on their way, and never even really made it to the Holy Land. Yes, there were crusades that were involved in stopping the Muslim invasion of Europe, certainly. But the big ones that we think about, like 1099, that was basically to seize and free or liberate Jerusalem. You know. Adherent of Lady Columbia. Semiagog, do you think neoclassical and Thomas Jefferson building type of architecture will come back in a new form? Well, it depends on whether or not we get our shit together and reconnect with our culture, the buildings and shapes. And in order to reconnect with the buildings of our culture, the shapes of buildings, we have to reconnect with the purposes that buildings served. We have to return to an idea that a building is for something. And it's more than simply keeping heat in and cold out, or, you know, allowing you to have plugs to stick things in or a roof to keep water out. Like, you can get much more granular in creating purpose for your homes. What else? Some Lauren Southern video up on YouTube. I haven't seen it. A woman's count matters most. I don't know what count means. I hope that's not a misspelling. Vlad the Impaler stopped the Muslims. Well, sort of. He did stop the Turks for a time. But remember, he had been a hostage and spoke Turkish. Half of the reason he was so effective is he could pretend to be Turkish. And he picked up the Turkish practice of impaling people and made good use of it. Oh, Mr. Ixme, not Lixme, is in the house, showing up late once again. There's only 8 minutes left, I'm sorry to say. Schrodinger's cat walks into a bar and doesn't. Do I think European cuisine is overrated? Oh no, European cuisine can be quite delicious. I come from the city with the best food, factually, decisively. All right, USA is going to implode in a couple of years. Yes, well, yes. Do I believe this from Stealth Creations? Hungarian Polish critiques of liberal democracy with illiberal democracy will make them successors to European light or fall into Russian influence. Too early to tell. They have some developmental phases they have got to go through now. They've got to kind of cough up the previous hairballs of socialism that are probably still half blocking their craws. And then there are some certain things that Western Europe went through and kind of swirled down the toilet with, but that still they advanced in some respects that I think Eastern Europe is going to have to do now. Individuals from Eastern Europe have all done all sorts of things that that match things that individuals from the West have done, but taken as a whole, Eastern Europe still has some lessons I think they're going to have to chew through. And hopefully they'll sort them out differently than the West has. It certainly looks like they will. Am I a musician? No, but that from Chuck Stewart. I have hung out with musicians. One of my close friends is a very good flamenco guitarist. And in order to dance or do palmas with flamenco, I had to be rhythmically, or had to get fairly good rhythmically. I play cajon a little bit, you know, with musicians for the flamenco thing. You do palmas and pitos and, you know, snapping and clapping. And yeah, and you have to do it with footwork as well. And I used to play Japanese drums, but Have I done any dance videos? Somewhere back, there's a Happy New Year's that's got a little thing of me doing a Bolivia's patata. It's on the channel somewhere. I'm descended from Charles Mattel, the original kebab remover. Surely he meant to write Charles Martel. Chuck the Hammer. Would Southern cuisine be thought of as quintessentially European, though? It has a lot of African, Caribbean, Acadian influence. Well, I come from New Orleans, and that has the best food in the world. And that's, of course, there's Creole stuff, and there's, you know, the stuff from the islands, and lots of French. So, yeah, it's European influence. Have I seen Molyneux's address to the EU? I have not. Oh, Mr. Ixme saying, yes, I'm a musician. Not really. Not really. Can you have on Halsey English? I don't know who Halsey English is, but I'll make a note to go look at whoever that is. I'll look at it when this clip is done. What else do we have? This is yes. Flamenco is very difficult. One of my faves next to neoclassical shredding. Yeah, with flamenco, it's the right hand stuff. Rasgueados, you know, 3-finger, 4-finger rasgueados, and what else do they call the rest of that? Where they're playing the two melodies at the same time. God damn it. It'll come back to me. Yeah, flamenco guitar is just insane. What else? Semi-Agog moonwalking video. Actually, I used to moonwalk as a little kid. I wasn't very good at it. I might try again. All right. Okay, if you guys want to find the flamenco, just go find, there's one that says Happy New Year's, and it's got me doing a dumb little dance. And the main video, the main clip for my channel with the intro clip, who is Semi-Agog or whatever, it has a little thing of me practicing flamenco moves in the clip. It's got me playing taiko drums. So just look at that. All right. Favorite pipe tobacco? Once upon a time, I liked Balkan Sobrani, but you can't get it anymore. Now I like Peter Stokkely's Virginia. I also roll it as into tubes for as a kind of cigarette as well. Flamenco is not real flamenco unless 3 people get killed. Yeah. Barbecue. There's one that says Happy New Year or something, or it's at the beginning. Just look at my, if you look back, I'm sorry, if I knew I would tell you, but if you look back through my videos and just look for whichever ones were posted right around the 1st of January, through the years the channel's been here, it's only been here 2.5 years or something. So you should be able to find it there. And again, on the about Semi-Agog video or whatever that's comes to new viewers of the page, you can see me doing some practice stuff. Okay, we're coming up, people, on where this rolls, where I go away so I can smoke and make myself another old-fashioned. Truth Seeker asks, so what is a future project, making documentary or something? I am going to be doing a clip on the idea everybody has that Jewish people are responsible for all the world's ills, but I will not be posting it here. It will go up on BitChute. That's one I'm working on in the background. I'm also working on one about the idea of what we're facing today being a kind of religion, that by referring to all of it as a secular ideology, we're missing the point that we're facing a wave of religious sentiment. All right, so yeah. Oh, and I mentioned this at the outset, so I'll say it again. There is a clip that just got posted to A Safer Space, which is the backup channel. You just click over to A Safer Space. There's a link for it on my main channel page, or do a search for A Safer Space. It has the crossed pitchfork and torch. That's my backup channel on YouTube. I just posted to it a clip of a discussion with Tim about Venezuela and oil and China. That just went up a day or 2 ago. You can also find it on A Safer Space over on BitChute, because there's both Semi-Agog and Safer Space on BitChute. And what else? Luciferian Outlaw, one of the guys who follows the content, wrote and asked if Tim and I could do a discussion about violence in the digital age in the time of the panopticon. You know, how do you deal with personal violence if you have to, if you're in fear for your life or whatever, in a situation where you're likely to be on camera at all times. Tim was very interesting. He was in fine form. That one I have just edited up. I just wanted to do this live stream, but actually when I'm done here, I'm going to get it started rendering and it should go up tomorrow, but it will be BitChute only. So go over to BitChute, Semiagog, and BitChute Safer Space and subscribe over there. What else is coming up? I just did a clip with Tim where he further described his whole thing about individualism, individualist socialism, if you will, what he calls, what is probably better called mutualism or mutuality. And that will go up probably by Sunday night. I have to edit it tomorrow and then render. So hopefully it'll be up by Sunday night, maybe Monday. All right, we're at 10:59. I'm going to give it a few more minutes, damn it, because I've got all these questions in. Oliver's New Year's flamenco video reported to YouTube for harassment. I would deserve it. BitChute, same subname as here. Yeah, if you go to, that's from Truth Seeker, I would go to BitChute and yeah, look for Semiagog or for a safer space. All you have to do is look down in the description box under the videos. It's not in this one, but go to any of my previous videos and you'll see a link for BitChute and it will take you to both of them. Waterpenny asks, the many one religion? Yes. Doc Toxic asks, hey, Ollie, have you ever read any texts or websites that deal with the Pilgrim Society or Le Cercle? No, I have not. All right. Secularism is just a post-Christian religion. Yes, but universal secular humanism metastasized. That, by the way, from Kill the Saints. Hello, Kill the Saints. Universal secular humanism metastasized through this many one religious filter into what we now have as communism, which is even worse. Roy Thomas Bauer asks, Ali, have you ever looked into the Talpiot project? No, I have not. Did I hear that Venezuela's gold that was loaded on the Russian plane was stopped from leaving Venezuela? Yes, I did. I think I saw something about that. Mark Collett has a very good documentary about Jewish involvement in Marxism. Can't wait to see yours. Yeah, I'm going to wait because people have told me Simon Harris has apparently done some stuff with this, you know, business about Jews and communists. Now I'm hearing about Mark Collett, and there's one other person, I mean, probably many more, but one who specifically has been recommended to me recently, and I haven't looked into it. Somebody talked about Caldies. I have a thing in one of my journals from the first time I went cross country from the East Coast to the West Coast. No, it was the second time. And I stopped at Caldi's coffee shop down there in the quarter. I still have a sketch I made in the coffee shop while going cross country on my motorcycle. But I didn't live in New Orleans. I went down there for summers to hang out because, as I said, both my parents are from there. But I still think of it as a city where drunks go to die. And now that they took down the statue of Lee from Lee Circle, I'm just not going back. As in, literally, I'm not going back to New Orleans anymore. All right. Rick Farwell says, thanks for the stream. I say thanks for dropping in and checking it out. All right. I'm going to leave here at 11:05, so there's 3 minutes more. I just want to see what else we have. Pilgrim Society, Angel Circle. Atheists are like zealous pilgrims. Yes. Leeless Circle. Yes, it is now. It is Leeless. All right, people. So for those of you who missed it, this thing opens up with me bitching about blackface and asking why nobody gives any kind of shit to all the people who never had blonde hair in their genetics, who are running around with fake blonde hair. I call that whiteface. And I think all the black women with yellow weaves and fake blonde hair and all the Asians with fake blonde hair and every other group that can't produce blonde hair should stop pretending they have it. I mean, if we're going to catch shit for someone dressing up in blackface, which I couldn't care less about, then everybody who's running around with fake blonde hair needs to stop. I call that cultural appropriation or mockery or whatever. Yeah, straight hair. Well, I guess the Asians can get away with straight hair, Mr. Ixme mentions. Okay, so yeah, the beginning, there was that, and then I went into this whole thing for many of you who might have missed it, the paralleling, or parallels, I should say, between sleep and death, and looking at maintaining consciousness through the process of sleeping and out the other side as a kind of training wheels arrangement for one to later tackle the idea of maintaining consciousness across lives. And then there's a bunch of this chatting stuff going on in the background. So this is pretty much the gist of it. Yeah, Prism, you showed up late, man. I'm leaving in exactly 1 minute, and I just covered what you missed, so I can't repeat it. I'm sorry to say. I wish. I'm sorry to see that you're coming in only late, because the conversation is always good. Definitely. Lucid dreaming skills, Mr. Ixme asks about. You're going to have to look at the earlier part of this video, because I discuss lucid dreaming. So that, I think, is the gist of it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I wound around a bit at the end, but there's enough consistent, thinking in a direction rather than just meandering all over the place and noodling as I'm doing in the second half. You can find that in the first half, and hopefully it will be worth your time. And what else should I say? Look forward to some clips going up tomorrow. One about violence that I did with Tim. That will be a BitChute exclusive. And then Sunday night or Monday, there's going to be one on this mutualism, individualist socialism, or whatever, from with the discussion with Tim. And yeah, I will be doing more of these, and I'll doubtless be having one of these soon with Tim as well. I know a lot of you guys like to pick his brain and hear his thoughts on his crazy mind, and that will happen again hopefully before too long as well. So that's all for me for now. Check in later, and thank you all for joining me for this live stream. And I'll be out of here. I think what I'm supposed to say is get it, got it, good. Semiagog, out.